Maya Pladek, an Israeli and the elected president of the Columbia School of General Studies student body, thank you for joining us at this important Arts conference today. I'm Yron, and we're both in New York, where the new academic year has just started, and the pro-Palestinian protests on campus as well. Maya, let's start with a brief reminder of what has happened at Columbia so far. Recently, I've published a piece detailing some of the hundreds of testimonies that a Columbia task force has collected of harassment and discrimination against Jewish students by professors and fellow students who were singled out in class for their identity or kicked out of social groups by their peers. Can you describe, Maya, some of the most concerning examples of harassment against Jewish and Israeli students that you have been exposed to as the president of the student body?
So the academic year just started this last week, but unfortunately I can already report that there have been a series of anti-Semitic incidents on campus. Just last week, there was a student who put up their mezuzah on top of their door, and they woke up the next morning and it had been ripped out. That's blatant anti-Semitism. Looking back to last semester and and last year overall, tensions on campus started on October 7th. On October 8th, Professor Joseph Mossad wrote an article where he described Hamas's attack on October 7th as awesome, incredible, and something worthy of jubilation and awe. As a result, and in the subsequent days, movements began on campus in support for Hamas. And because the university refused to condemn any of this rhetoric, professors began to actively explain Hamas's actions as something that would be deemed as reasonable. The university refused to condemn any of this, and as a result, we saw many sit-in protests and many protests in and outside of campus in the subsequent weeks. Incidents of physical and verbal violence towards Jewish and Israeli students already began in October. There was an incident where an Israeli student was hit after he was trying to put up a Bring Them Home poster on campus just a week after October 7th. In the subsequent weeks, you had many incidents where Jewish students and Israeli students had slurs shouted at them. They were spat on, and they were also physically assaulted. In addition, many times Jewish and Israeli students were depicted as skunks and other animals on campus in posters in an effort to dehumanize them. In April, after President Shafiq began testifying at Congress, campus blew up with an encampment. However, after the first round of arrests, many members of the local community in the city also came to join them. I think it's wrong to depict these protests as political because they weren't actually about the war. They're about removing anything Israeli from campus, such as removing the programs that are primarily Jewish and Israeli. This includes the TAU Columbia dual degree, as well as closing down the soon-to-be Global Center in Tel Aviv. In addition, anything to do with Israel was boycotted in this, where any company that might have a store or an office in Israel was also told to be divested from amongst the university portfolio. There were many incidents of physical and verbal assault during this period, where many Jewish and Israeli students were physically hit after holding Israeli flag, and there were many chants calling for the removal of Zionists and Jews from campus. In addition to this, the protests and the encampment actually excluded Jewish and Israeli students who attempted to come in an effort to engage in dialogue. We saw that professors actually guarded this encampment in an effort to block these students from joining. Many professors also decided to bring in their classes inside the encampment, thus making it so that many Jewish and Israeli students weren't able to engage in their classes and thus were discriminated upon academically. This means that many Jewish and Israeli students actually lost higher education over the last semester.
Columbia's president, Shafiq, resigned recently after these months of tension on campus. Do you think Shafiq did enough to balance free speech and the right to protest with addressing this rhetoric that triggered violence and spread misinformation?
Well, clearly no, because what we saw in April. I think that President Shafiq was facing a real lot of challenges. I think she was being pushed in every direction. But at the same time, Columbia wasn't acting according to clear policies. They were constantly changing. And we're still seeing this today. Columbia needs to provide clear policies. It's purposely been left vague and allows free interpretation. If anything, over the last summer, it's actually become even more free for interpretation. I think the guidelines during that last academic year were stricter. So clearly, Columbia needs rules, and they need to set clear boundaries and leave minimum room for interpretation. They also need to clarify the consequences and once they've clarified the consequences, stand behind them. Right now, there's nothing indicating this. But we also need to give the new president the benefit of the doubt and let her get settled, as she's just started over the last few weeks. But I think that this is really important to consider, that so far Colombia has not stood by its policies. It's not enabled both free speech and for the lack of discrimination against Jewish and Israeli students.
So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. What do you expect from Colombia's new leadership this year as the protests continue and may even escalate?
I mean, I hope that they establish a very, very clear policies, especially as outlined by the Anti-Semitism Task Force, about how they can avoid discrimination. I think up until now, there's been a tendency to legitimize the targeting of Israelis specifically because it's not considered as anti-Semitism, for example, and that cannot continue anymore. There should be no situation where students or faculty are discriminated upon by any aspect of their identity. That's just discrimination. And up until now, Colombia has kind of waved it away. I think that Colombia needs to stand firm with its policies and start making decisions quickly. I think up until now, we're kind of in a state of limbo right now, with the university refusing to decide exactly how they're going to take action against protests, how they're going to protect free speech, but without enabling a situation like last year where campus effectively shut down for 3 weeks, where no students were able to access campus or access dining halls, and most finals were actually canceled as a result of the protests. That can't happen again. And I think Colombia understands this, but they don't fully understand that they can't wait so long while they're making these decisions. I think that the university has to start making difficult decisions about how they're going to handle things. I think also beyond this, there's been this misinterpretation about what was happening on campuses, where they've suggested that what happened on campuses is political, as opposed to something that's actually about human rights, about whether students should be able to participate in classes. And effectively, the protest movement, and they've said it in their on their social media pages, they say it in all the pamphlets that they hand out around campus, are actually vying for the end of the academic experience. They want the end of the American education. And the university needs to start taking it as a serious threat to that, because the university wants full education to occur on campus, but it's kind of allowing itself to be pushed by this policy in the name of free speech. But there's no way to have freedom of speech without everybody being safe enough to speak.
To end the conversation, we're at the conference speaking about peace and solutions, even in this very dark hour. Have you been able to open any dialogue with Palestinian students, to meet Israeli students, or find some common ground speaking about shared solutions for the future?
I really wish there were opportunities like that on this campus. Unfortunately, the protest movement has tried to shut down any conversation with any Israeli or any Jewish voice on campus. This is effectively the movement of the program. I think that the university needs to try to facilitate opportunities for dialogue between different groups of students on campus. There was one effort by the university last year where they attempted to bring in somebody who, the former head of SJP, who's based in UC Berkeley, as well as a prominent Jewish voice on campus. And that event was boycotted by the protest movement because it suggested that normalization was, any efforts of dialogue was normalization, and thus it shouldn't have been able to occur at all. And I think that that's been the kind of sentiment on campus right now. And it's also been, ultimately, everybody, I think even in the administration, is afraid to try again in building these conversations. But that's what universities are about. Universities are about bringing in people from different perspectives to be able to talk about the upcoming solutions of the future. I have seen a lot of Jewish and Israeli students try to do this. We saw them going into the encampment in an effort to have dialogue, because they understand that it's not just one way or the other. But unfortunately, we're not seeing this on campus. It was one of my goals as student body president to bring in dialogue, to bring in conversation, to bring in a sense of unity over whether it's regarding this issue or regarding other issues, specifically trying to bring conversation back to campus, because effectively it's been shut down and it's continuing to be shut down, as we can see on campus right now.
Thank you so much, Maya. We wish with you for a new year with more dialogue between all the parties. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
תודה רבה. אני מזמינה את חבר הכנסת והרמטכ"ל לשעבר גדי איזנקוט לשיחה עם אמיר אורן, עיתונאי הארץ.